Nietzsche once wrote that most men are not truly alive. They exist, but they exist as shadows, weak, compliant, desperate for approval, enslaved by the very people they claim to love. He believed that a man who cannot stand alone is already broken, already defeated, already a servant dressed in the costume of freedom. And here is the forbidden truth no one wants to say out loud. Women instinctively fear men who do not need them, because such men are untouchable. They cannot be manipulated with affection. They cannot be tamed with guilt. They cannot be bent into submission with the threat of withdrawal. They stand apart, like mountains unmoved by the storm, and for that reason they inspire both fascination and terror. This is not the narrative you were taught. You were told to give endlessly, to prove your worth, to become lovable by sacrificing yourself. But Nietzsche saw the sickness hidden in this story. He saw that dependence is the silent poison that rots men from within. A man who cannot bear solitude will always kneel to someone who promises him connection. And that, Nietzsche argued, is why most men remain slaves their entire lives. Slaves not to chains of iron, but to the invisible leash of their own neediness. If you have ever wondered why strength feels rare, why independence feels dangerous, and why women are drawn to men who radiate self-sufficiency even as they recoil from them, then you are standing on the edge of a truth that will either liberate you or haunt you. Nietzsche's lesson is not comfortable. It was not meant to be. But if you listen, if you dare to confront it, you may finally understand why women fear men who do not need them. Friedrich Nietzsche was not a man born into comfort, nor was he a thinker who fit neatly into the categories of his time. He lived in the 19th century, a Europe swelling with industrial progress, religious decline, and a rising middle class desperate for stability. Yet Nietzsche's life was anything but stable. He was plagued by illness, often bedridden for days or weeks, tormented by migraines and failing eyesight. He walked alone, both physically and intellectually, refusing to bow to the moral conventions of his age. He declared that God is dead, not to celebrate chaos, but to announce a terrifying reality. The old certainties that guided human life had crumbled, and in their place, mankind faced an abyss. This abyss was not just religious, it was personal. Nietzsche saw in the men around him a desperate clinging to comfort, routine, and validation. He saw men who married not from strength, but from fear of being alone. Men who sought the approval of women not because they stood tall in themselves, but because they had no spine without that validation. For Nietzsche, this was not merely weakness, it was slavery disguised as virtue. His philosophy was not a manifesto of hatred toward women, as some critics carelessly assume. Instead, it was a challenge to men themselves. He believed that only the man who has conquered himself, who has forged his own values and carried the weight of solitude, could stand as free. And freedom, in Nietzsche's terms, was not political or social. It was existential. It was the power to live without needing anyone to complete you. This is why Nietzsche's ideas remain dangerous today. We live in an age where dependence is still dressed as love, where weakness is still excused as sensitivity, and where men are often encouraged to measure their worth by how useful they are to others. To embody Nietzsche's vision is to reject all of that. It is to step into a kind of isolation that feels unbearable at first, but from that isolation comes a strength that no one can take away. Women sense this strength instinctively. It unsettles them because it means you are not under their control. Society fears it because it cannot domesticate you. And you, if you embrace it, will discover that it changes not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Nietzsche's philosophy is often reduced to fragments. The God is dead proclamation, the Übermensch, the will to power. But beneath these scattered pieces lies a central, unsettling truth. Human beings, and especially men, are enslaved by their need. It is not chains that bind us, but the invisible dependency we carry. Dependency on approval, dependency on love, dependency on being wanted. To Nietzsche, this dependency was the great sickness of his time, and it remains the great sickness of ours. He looked at the ordinary man, and he saw not a warrior, not a creator, not a free being, but a beggar. A beggar for affection, a beggar for attention, a beggar for recognition. And in this begging, Nietzsche saw the death of dignity. Consider the story of a man who builds his life around a woman's acceptance. At first, he believes he has found purpose. He works harder, dresses sharper, aligns his decisions with her desires. But slowly, Almost imperceptibly, he loses himself. His identity collapses into hers. His strength melts into her expectations. When she withdraws, he panics. When she disapproves, he crumbles. This is the man Nietzsche pitied and despised. Not because the man loved, but because he loved from weakness. Nietzsche contrasted this with the image of the solitary figure, the man who can stand alone in the wilderness of existence. This man does not need the world's approval, nor a woman's reassurance, nor society's applause. He creates his own values, his own meaning. He becomes a law unto himself. And because he does not need, he becomes powerful. This is what Nietzsche called the will to power, not domination over others, but mastery over oneself. The highest expression of human life is not servitude disguised as love, but independence forged in solitude. But here lies the paradox Nietzsche understood with brutal clarity. Women, and indeed society itself, are drawn to such men even as they fear them. A man who does not need cannot be controlled. He cannot be bribed with affection, nor threatened with rejection. He does not grovel, does not apologize for existing, does not mold himself to please. He is untouchable in the deepest sense. And it is precisely this untouchability that both attracts and terrifies. Nietzsche's writings often circle around this dangerous truth. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he depicts the higher man as one who can dance on the edge of chaos, who carries the solitude of a mountain yet radiates vitality. In Beyond Good and Evil, he warns that those who submit to the expectations of others lose their chance at greatness. These are not abstract ideas, they are psychological weapons. Nietzsche wanted to shake men out of their neediness, to strip them bare until they stood naked before themselves. Think of a lion in a cage. As long as it is fed, stroked, and entertained, it purrs like a house cat. But remove its food and it whines. That is the modern man, Nietzsche argued, dependent, domesticated, safe but enslaved. The true lion, the one who can hunt alone, terrifies both the zookeeper and the spectator. It is dangerous because it cannot be tamed. Women fear men who embody this untamed strength not because such men are cruel, but because they are free. Freedom resists control, and control is the foundation upon which most relationships, most societies, are quietly built. Nietzsche knew this would not be a popular truth. To tell men that they must learn to stand alone, that they must embrace suffering rather than flee from it, that they must stop begging for love and instead become worthy of it. That is to declare war on human weakness. But Nietzsche was not afraid of war. He believed life itself was war, a constant clash between strength and fragility, creation and decay, independence and submission. The man who cannot endure loneliness will forever surrender himself to those who promise him companionship. The man who can endure it, and even thrive in it, becomes untouchable. The core idea, then, is simple but merciless. Men who need are slaves. Men who transcend need are free. And freedom, in Nietzsche's vision, is not comfort. It is not safety. It is a storm. It is the lonely path of the one who dares to say, "I am enough." From this storm comes a magnetic force. Women sense it. Society senses it. And though they may recoil, they cannot help but circle closer, like moths to a flame. For even fear has its own form of desire. This is why Nietzsche's ideas have remained so unsettling for over a century. They cut against everything we are told about love, about relationships, about masculinity. They expose the soft underbelly of human need, the desperate clinging we dress up as virtue. And they demand a question no man can escape. Are you living as a beggar or as a creator? Do you kneel for affection, or do you stand as a mountain, untouchable, unmovable, complete in yourself? Nietzsche's answer was not gentle. He believed that most men would fail this test. Most would remain bound to their need, chained by their longing to be wanted. But he also believed that the few who rose above, those rare individuals who could endure the agony of solitude and forge themselves anew, would not just live differently. They would live dangerously, radiantly, as beings who could not be controlled. And that, in the end, is the truth hidden within Nietzsche's work. Women fear men who do not need them, because such men belong to no one. They are free, and freedom is always frightening. It is one thing to understand Nietzsche's warning in theory. It is another to face its weight in the reality of our lives today. Because while his words were forged in the 19th century, they cut even deeper in the 21st. We live in a culture that has perfected the art of dependency. Everything around you, From the ads on your phone to the advice fed into your ears, trains you to need. To need attention, to need validation, to need someone else to complete you. And men, more than ever, are drowning in this ocean of dependence. You can see it in relationships. How many men today enter a romance not from strength, but from emptiness? They believe love will heal their wounds, that a girlfriend or wife will give their life meaning. They hand over the keys to their identity, saying silently, "Tell me who I am. Tell me I matter." And at first, women respond. They nurture, they reassure, they pour affection into the man. But slowly, that affection sours into disdain. Because instinctively, they sense what Nietzsche already knew. A man who cannot stand alone is not safe. He is a burden. He is fragile. He is secretly demanding that she be his spine, and no woman respects being forced into that role. She may pity him, she may stay with him, but desire evaporates the moment she realizes he is kneeling. This is why so many men today complain of rejection, of relationships collapsing, of women pulling away. They think the answer is to be nicer, to give more, to sacrifice further. But that is only a deeper surrender. Nietzsche's warning echoes here with merciless clarity. If you are dependent, you will be discarded. If you beg for love, you will lose it. Because what women truly long for is not a servant, but a man who radiates independence so strongly that she knows he could walk away and still remain whole. You can also see this truth in society at large. Modern culture does not reward strength, it rewards compliance. Look at the average workplace. Most men are terrified of risk, of stepping outside the invisible boundaries of approval. They trade their creativity for predictability, their fire for a paycheck, their will for the safety of being told what to do. They cling to comfort and call it success. Nietzsche would spit at such a life. He believed the man who bows endlessly to external systems, the boss, the company, the government, the approval of strangers, is living as a domesticated animal. He may be well-fed, but he is still in a cage. And then there is the digital world. Social media has created a generation of men who chase likes as if their existence depends on it. They post, they pose, they craft images not from power but from desperation. See me. Approve of me. Tell me I matter. This is slavery at its most subtle. Because the man who requires constant digital validation has already confessed he cannot stand alone in silence. He needs the chorus of strangers to confirm he exists. Nietzsche would have seen this as the ultimate humiliation of modern man, the surrender of his selfhood to the faceless mob. But it does not end there. The psychological consequences of this dependency ripple through every aspect of life. Think of the man who fears rejection so deeply that he never risks approaching a woman. He sits paralyzed, scrolling endlessly, envying others, consumed by silent resentment. His fear is not of women, it is of himself. It is the fear that, if stripped of approval, he will discover he has no foundation. He has never forged his own values, never carved his own path, never become strong enough to stand in solitude. And so he hides. Nietzsche would have called him already defeated. Yet the opposite is also true. The rare man who does embrace solitude, who can bear silence, who dares to create himself without begging. This man radiates a different presence. You have seen him, even if only briefly. He enters a room without performing. He speaks without rushing to please. He loves without clinging. And paradoxically, women are drawn to him precisely because he does not need them. His freedom is magnetic, even if it unsettles. He is proof of what Nietzsche called the higher man, one who transcends the common sickness of dependence and becomes a source of power in himself. This lesson is not about cruelty. It is not about dismissing women or denying love. Nietzsche was not telling men to become heartless machines. He was telling them to stop being slaves, to stop worshiping the false idol of need. A man who loves from weakness suffocates his partner. A man who loves from strength gives her something infinitely more valuable, the choice to join him without ever being his crutch. That is why women fear and admire such men at once. They know that if they leave, he will not crumble. He will not beg. He will not kneel. He will remain himself, untouchable. In the modern world, this independence is more necessary than ever. Consider how easily men are manipulated today. Advertisers promise them happiness if they buy the right product. Influencers dangle validation if they follow the right trend. Politicians play on their fears to extract obedience. Even relationships, at their darkest, become systems of control, emotional blackmail disguised as devotion. The man who cannot stand alone is endlessly vulnerable. The man who can, however, becomes immune. He sees the games. He refuses to play. He carries his solitude like armor, and that armor cannot be pierced by the trivial manipulations of the age. But here is the truth most men do not want to face. This path is brutal. To stand alone is not glamorous. It is lonely, it is painful, it is heavy with doubt. Nietzsche himself spent much of his life in near total isolation, misunderstood, rejected, mocked. He warned that those who walk this path will suffer. But he also insisted that suffering is the crucible where greatness is born. A man who avoids it will remain soft, pliable, dependent. A man who embraces it will emerge forged, unbreakable, magnetic in his independence. And so the modern application of Nietzsche's insight is both a warning and an invitation. If you are living as a beggar, begging for love, for attention, for approval, then you are already enslaved. No amount of charm or kindness will save you, because weakness cannot be disguised. But if you dare to cut the leash, if you dare to endure solitude and wrestle with your own emptiness, then you will find a power that no one can touch. Women will fear it, society will resent it, and yet both will be drawn to it. Because in a world drowning in dependence, the man who does not need stands like a storm, terrifying and irresistible. What, then, can be extracted from Nietzsche's brutal vision and applied to the life of a man who wishes to rise above weakness? Philosophy without application is just poetry. Nietzsche's truth, though, was meant to be lived. And it begins with a recognition that your first and greatest battle is against your own dependency. Everything else flows from that war. The first lesson is simple to say, but excruciating to embody. Never beg for love. To beg is to declare yourself incomplete. To plead for attention is to announce your weakness. A man who kneels for affection becomes invisible in her eyes, because what he offers is not strength, but emptiness disguised as devotion. Stop asking to be chosen. Stand as if you are already chosen by life itself. Only then will love, if it comes, be real and not manipulation. The second lesson: solitude is not your enemy. It is your training ground. Nietzsche believed solitude was the forge where a man discovers his own values, stripped of society's approval and stripped of a woman's validation. Most men flee it. They fill silence with noise, loneliness with distraction. But if you want to carry true power, you must learn to sit in the void without collapsing. Spend time alone until solitude hardens you, until you no longer crave the presence of others to feel complete. The third: never surrender your spine. This means you do not contort yourself into someone else's ideal. Too many men twist their desires, their opinions, even their ambitions to fit into a partner's expectations. In doing so, they vanish. Nietzsche warned against this collapse, because once you give away your spine, you give away your freedom. Speak what you believe. Live how you choose. If she leaves, let her. Better to be abandoned while standing tall than to be loved while bent on your knees. The fourth lesson is harsher still. Learn to walk away without hesitation. The man who cannot walk away is always a slave. If your job humiliates you, if your relationship suffocates you, if your society chains you, leave. Not in bitterness, but in strength. Nietzsche admired the man who could cut ties without fear, because that man proves to himself that he is not bound. If you cannot leave, you are not free. The fifth: cultivate danger within yourself. Nietzsche's ideal man was not soft, not endlessly agreeable. He was sharp, unpredictable, capable of standing against the herd. To embody this is not to be violent or cruel, but to hold an energy that says, "I cannot be controlled." Women respond to this with both fear and fascination, because it signals that you are no longer domesticated. Do not mistake politeness for virtue. True virtue lies in having the capacity for power and choosing when to wield it. The sixth: suffer deliberately. Nietzsche wrote that to live is to suffer, but to survive is to find meaning in that suffering. Weak men run from pain, numbing themselves with entertainment, substances, or shallow pleasures. Strong men embrace pain as a crucible. They work, they struggle, they endure hardship, knowing it is shaping them into something unbreakable. If you avoid suffering, you avoid growth. If you confront it, you rise above the herd. The seventh: never outsource your worth. Your value does not depend on her approval, on society's applause, or on numbers flashing on a screen. Nietzsche warned that external validation is the leash around the neck of the common man. Tear it off. Build worth from your own standards. Live by your own code. Only then can you stand without trembling when the world turns its back. The eighth, do not confuse love with possession. A man who needs will try to control, to cage, to cling. But a man who is free loves differently. He offers love as an overflow of his strength, not as a desperate grasp. Nietzsche's higher man does not bind a woman to him. He walks with her as long as she chooses to walk, and if she leaves, he remains whole. This kind of love terrifies, because it cannot be manipulated, and yet it is the only love that commands respect. The ninth, embody silence more than noise. Weak men prove themselves with constant words, with performances, with showing off. Strong men let silence speak for them. They do not need to announce their power, it radiates from their being. Nietzsche believed greatness is quiet, steady, undeniable. Practice restraint. Speak less, act with precision, and let your presence, not your pleading, do the work. The final lesson is this: become untouchable by becoming whole. The ultimate fear of most men is abandonment. But Nietzsche taught that the higher man has nothing to fear, because he is never abandoned. He carries everything he needs within himself. When you no longer fear loss, you become unstoppable. Women sense it, society senses it, and both are unsettled. Because they cannot control what they cannot break. These lessons are not comfortable. They demand sacrifice, isolation, suffering. They require you to tear down the illusions you have been fed about love, about masculinity, about strength. But if you live them, you will embody what Nietzsche envisioned. A man who cannot be owned, a man who does not beg, a man who does not kneel. A man who stands as a storm, feared, desired, and above all free. Nietzsche's words remain as sharp today as when they were first written. He saw the hidden chains long before we admitted they existed. The invisible dependency that turns men into beggars, the weakness dressed as love, the desperation disguised as virtue. He warned that most men would never escape it. They would live and die as servants, not to a master of flesh and blood, but to their own hunger to be wanted. And he was merciless in his judgment. Such men will never be free. But in that mercilessness, there was also a call to become more than what society, or women, or weakness demands. Nietzsche's higher man, his free man, was not a fantasy. He was a possibility for anyone willing to endure the loneliness of standing apart, the suffering of forging oneself in silence, the risk of being feared as much as admired. And so the lesson is as haunting as it is liberating. Women fear men who do not need them, because such men belong to no one. They are untouchable, unbreakable, whole. They carry solitude like a weapon, and independence like a crown. They are storms walking among the tame. You must decide which path you will take. You can remain as you are, clinging, begging, building your worth on someone else's approval. You can continue to kneel, hoping your sacrifice will buy you love. But if you do, Nietzsche would tell you plainly, you are already a slave. Or you can choose the harder road. You can embrace solitude until it no longer terrifies you. You can forge your own values, carry your own weight, and love from strength rather than desperation. And when you do, you will discover a freedom that cannot be given or taken. It simply is. Remember this truth as it was meant to be heard. If you do not learn to stand alone, you will kneel forever. But if you dare to face the silence, if you dare to cut the leash, you will rise into a life few men will ever taste. A life that terrifies those who would control you. A life that unsettles those who would cage you. A life that draws others near, even as they fear its fire. That is Nietzsche's gift and his curse. To live free is to live alone, but it is also to live as more than a man. It is to live as a force,